Hi, everyone. Welcome to UnMute, a series to open up discussions on hard-hitting, often undiscussed topics in the music industry. Today, we're opening up a discussion around being LGBTQIA in the music industry and what that means to each of our participants today. So I'm Morgan Ballard, Marketing Project Manager at Output, but I'll be passing the mic to today's participants to really guide the discussion. So let's just get started with please share how you'd like to be addressed and something about you or the music you make. Open to volunteers, but I'll also point if needed.
I'll start. My name is Brandon Wisniewski. I go by Wreckno when I'm on stage, and I identify as he, him, but I will, I'll answer to any pronoun. She's that girl. But I'm just very stoked to be here. Love being queer in straight dominated music industry. So it's awesome to be able to meet other people that are in the same boat.
Lovely. And I should have started by introducing myself properly too. Morgan Ballard, she, her, but we'll also call to anything, answer to any call. So with that, who wants to take over for the next intro?
I am Makita Ayane, and I go by she, her. Yes.
I'm Manami. I also go by she, her. Together we're Bebi Monsuta.
And
we just make very music that's inspired by our culture. And we just want to make people just love to dance and to have a good time again. We're very happy that you have us here to talk.
Yes.
Lovely. All right, let's pass the mic to Bianca since we're off mute, yeah?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Bianco. I identify they, them. I am a producer and electronic artist. I am super happy to be here, especially because I am femme presenting in a 95% male-dominated music producer role, which is wild. And yeah, I'm excited to start talking about this more and helping raise awareness for the experience of anybody in the LGBTQ community in music.
Nice. Well, thank you so much.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. My name's Bill. I answer to he, him, sometimes girl, depending on who I'm talking to. I've been in the music business for 30 years. I am pretty much a multi-hyphenate. I've been a journalist, artist manager, producer, music supervisor, production company consultant. I do a lot of different things, and I still feel very fortunate and blessed to be able to do that within the community. We've supported a lot of projects and lots of different artists throughout the years and continue to do so. And I'm happy to, extend a little bit of knowledge that I have. Each one teach one. I feel it's very important. I think particularly in this business, we don't share a lot. So I'm happy to do what I can on these sorts of platforms to share whatever little knowledge I can pass on to you. And I always learn too. So it's always a learning process. So, no one knows everything. So.
We hear you there. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us today. We're really so happy to have all of y'all here. And, as Bianca mentioned, yes, there are so many experience under the umbrella of the LGBTQIA+ experience. So we're just here to sort of shed light onto a variety of those today. So just to set the room really quickly, I'll be asking questions to guide the conversation today, but this is really just a safe space for each of you to ask questions or bring up topics that you may not do so easily in the outside world. So it is really a all open dialogue for while we have you. But we'll get started a bit broadly and just sort of learning more about each of y'all. So why did you choose to join the discussion today? Can you share a little bit about your experience in the industry so far?
I'll start.
There we go.
So I wanted to do this obviously because it was an awesome opportunity, but for me growing up and being super obsessed with electronic music from 2010 and on, most of the festivals and things I was attending, it was a straight cis dominated kind of environment, it was my favorite thing in the world. But I'm very thankful that now when I go to some of these festivals, there's like always women, there's mostly always queer people on the lineups, and it's still a very small amount of people, but it's like we're making the moves that need to happen, and it's now like, you know, applauded more than it was even just 10 years ago. So being part of any discussion like this is like my heart. So thank you for having me for this.
Yeah, you know, it's actually, it's true, like those lineups are very cis male driven, but what is also true is like the networks with which they get those opportunities is also very cis male driven. So like it ends up like netting out or like translating into exposure and visibility for these artists, but underneath it there are just like has always been historically such support systems for white male cis men in electronic music. And so you really, I've been starting to feel it shifting like in the honestly the past like 2 years. But the reason why I wanted to be a part of this discussion is because it's a work in progress. We're building those networks. Like they just get plugged in because of the support systems that are already exist. And it's quite simply unfair. And just needs to change. So every discussion like this helps facilitate that change.
It's really important. I definitely can, as someone who I've worked with a lot of the big artists like David Guetta and Tiesto, and so I've seen how that electronic festival network works. And as a queer person of color coming up in the business, and I've worked in a lot of different areas of dance music business, it's been pretty much sort of my thing for many, many years. I recognize it off the top. What I've definitely found is that, as you guys have pointed out, like they get the first call. The boys get the first call. Unless they feel that you have something that you're going to bring, and I don't mean this in a qualitative way in terms of music or talent, if they feel that you're going to bring something, I put that in quotes, to their festival or to their party, then you get the call. Otherwise, you have to grind. You have to be better than the guys. You have to constantly be doing the work. You have to constantly be showing up. Just because you're good doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the call. Doesn't mean you're going to get the booking. Doesn't mean you're going to get the hire. They are always going to go to their friends. I learned that so long ago. You're kind of like, how come my guys, my clients aren't getting the call, or I'm not getting the call for this gig or that gig? I'm like, oh, it's the boys network. And I don't care what they say, it rarely changes. So it's really, really important, I always feel, to make sure that you're doing your best work, but that you also know, it's almost like the art of war. I always kind of equate this as old Chinese philosophy. Know how these guys play their game. You can't operate within the system and not understand how the system works. Sometimes I talk to folks and they don't want to understand how the white guys play the game. They're just like, well, we're over here doing something. Like, well, if you don't actually understand how they play the game, you're not going to get in, and you're also not going to succeed within it. You have to understand it. You don't have to agree with it, but you're only going to be able to change it by being able to get in and understand how the inner workings are. And then once you can kind of figure things out, you can kind of like make a move. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I completely agree. It's like, it's a constant thing. It's not just, it's not continuous. You really have to hammer away at it. And it's important that each artist hammer away, producer, DJ, performer, hammer away at it in their own way. And then collectively, it sort of starts to make shifts.
Yeah. And just to say, like, apart from just the festival circuit, it's like, you'll see these exact same power like structures exist in like, who gets the call to produce that new artist, you know, like they ask their friends, they ask who they know, like they're like, oh, we're friends with Bebi Monsuta. So it's like, they goes to, you know, so it's like very small networks of people, white men getting past the same, like production gigs as well as like the DJ festival gigs.
Which then, I'm just going to point in 1 second, like when you look at the totality of how the music business is and where you can actually generate income, there's not a lot of places where we can actually make money if you're doing this for a living. That's publishing, producing, performance. And then if you're big, you get merch and all that other sort of stuff. So when you're referring to sort of somebody getting the hookup in terms of a production or co-write, you're also giving them some publishing income, which is equity for life. Like there's that sort of like, that's the stuff that they don't tell you. You know, like, yeah, I just hooked my friend up with this, you know, 20% on this publishing of this huge record. They're going to be set. They're going to have some income coming in for forever if it's a hit record. So there's that.
And just going back to what BIIANCO and Bill Coleman, you guys was talking about with the industry and kind of like, you know, being a brown person, it's very difficult. I think just being brown alone, it's very difficult when it comes to, also we're very femme presenting and we're, you know, we're judged by that first, foremost. There's a lot of people that'll assume that, you know, we're straight, and or that we're not even behind like our creative vision. So they'll see these videos and these photo shoots and different things that we do, and they assume that we're not the ones who did it, because people usually judge us by the way we look. And then on top of that, mixing that in, we was like talking and thinking about, you know, we always feel judgmental in spaces, as like the LGBTQ plus I spaces, because we always have been judged based on we look. A lot of people do assume that, and so when we're going into different spaces and we're making different music and stuff, we're kind of judged on that basis. So it definitely is difficult combining the two, you know, being a woman, and on top of that, I identify as pansexual, Akitas, bisexual. So being in those spaces is very, very difficult and
that's sorry, I don't want to cut you off. And that's why I think that it was very important to be here today, because you know, when you know those things, like, okay, this is, I may not be like the cliche or the norm, just as most of us aren't the norm. And so it's great to embrace that and to say, well, hey, I want to change people's perceptions instead of letting everyone else's perception change me. And I think that a very important part about having this discussion today is just that. It's just about communicating, and the fact that we're all in this one chat communicating together. I think that people underestimate the power of communication. If we can have just a discussion like this about a lot of things in the world, we can have so many amazing breakthroughs, you know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's like, go ahead.
Yeah, so just like what Bill was saying about like also with jobs and different stuff like that, it's less about now like what you can bring, but more about like the social media presence and the name and stuff. And you have to be extra when people find out what, you know, your sexuality is or what you go by, what your pronouns are, and it's just even more difficult to be in different spaces. But yeah, that's why we kind of wanted to join the conversation today, because we wanted to give a different perspective of what it's like being brown and being tan and bi.
Yeah. No, there's always a huge intersectionality piece to it, because it's like, yes, it's not just, you know, showing up to the space as a Black person. I'm showing up to spaces as queer Black woman. So there's that whole different level of association there. But your piece on communication and sort of making sure that there are opportunities to speak to it, being that everyone has such a unique experience with how they maneuver through the world, it is so important that we all, you know, have a time to not only share, but hear others' experiences and then learn and take that with us. I definitely want to tap into the networking pieces and that sort of in-group, out-group culture that everyone has already mentioned on this discussion. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about sort of the piece of like empowerment and the like how each of y'all's identities or journeys have really just inspired you to continue to create, or how has your, you know, creation helped progress your personal journey?
I guess we'll answer this one first.
Yeah, obviously, if whatever everyone is comfortable with sharing, we'll have ample to talk about at the throughout this call.
Well, I'm still coming to terms with different things, especially just how we navigate through things. Because I think as of recently, I have been experimenting more on like my lyrics and different things that I put in the music for representation, which is very important because, you know, that's what we all do. We all do music, and music really can change people's spirit and soul. So that is something that we both have been,
like the comfortability and not changing a lyric because you want it to be, you know, universally appealing. Sometimes we have that dilemma. I'm not sure if anyone else here has that dilemma.
Yeah.
But you know, like when you want to change the lyric because you're like, oh, you know, you might think, oh, children are gonna sing this. And then you have to remember, like, some children want to be seen and some of them are not able to be seen. Like when we were younger and we didn't have the proper representation on television. And so I'm like, that's something I've been going through lately, like making sure like I'm telling the proper story and I'm not cutting corners to hide a part of who I am, you know, like this is appropriate because it's who I am, like, you know?
Just thinking about putting marijuana, if you could say that, right?
Yeah.
I just remember like, if you even said something like that a long time ago, it was just like, but like we wrote a whole song about it. Like it was just fun to be able to talk about how we're stoners and especially Akita, big time. Being able to just like use our voices is just so important, and that is just something that we try to do everywhere that we go.
And honestly, Josephine Baker honestly made me feel a lot more comfortable about that. You know, it's her thumb for me.
We stand on a lot of shoulders of some very strong people, for sure. 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So,
sorry, can I go? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I would say when it comes to like how like your journey with yourself and how it can like affect your creations, like for me, because I DJ, I produce, and then I also like sing and I rap. And I started rapping when I was like 15, but like in the last couple of years, it's become like the main thing that people, I guess, are expecting from some of my performances. And it was then, at first I was just playing music for like the bass music scene of EDM. So I like to say that no matter what club we were at, if I was playing it, it was a gay club during my set, because like, even if it wasn't like me rapping yet, you could just feel the energy compared to some other EDM sets I felt. And since I've started using, like writing more, using my voice, and I had a song with Grizz that was like it's called Medusa, and it was, the whole point was like queer empowerment. It was, you know, like you're gay and you're amazing. And that was like the vibe. And since that came out in 2020, the amount of people that have been able to like come up to me and just be like, thank you, like this is like this helped me, or like this gave me like a moment to feel seen in this environment, like, or EDM world that I care about so much. I like that has pushed me now to create even more and be more unapologetic with like what you guys are talking about, how sometimes you're like, oh, will this be universal for like everybody to see? I feel that all the time. And I work with a lot of straight white men, and before I send them vocals, sometimes I'll be like, am I being too gay? Like, is this too gay for them? And in reality, it's like, shut that shit down, because like there's a strong amount of people that like need to hear what you're saying so that they feel like, you know, represented. And they like, if I would have had certain music that's out now and in the mainstream, like if Lil Nas X was like a thing when I was like in high school, I would have been going insane. But it's just I think, yeah, it's just like the more real you are with yourself and your writing and stuff, the more people it can reach. And for me, that's just what's been refueling me to continue to push that.
And Brandon, I'm one of those people who is thanking you for the Medusa, because that was my pump me up song in my workout this morning. So
yes, thank you.
I feel you on that imposter syndrome stuff, because like I think my experience, like it's been interesting because I wasted a lot of time not producing my own music, and thinking in some ways like I needed to qualify myself as an artist in a band with men, with straight men. So I spent a lot of years in an indie band, not as like producing my own stuff, spending so much money like on like producers and stuff where I would backseat drive, mostly because I had never really seen anybody who looked like me producing. Like I'm 32, so I like grew up, like I went to college in 2008 to 2011 and I studied music, and there were like no women. I think you had Linda Perry, but Linda Perry wasn't behind like the computer screen, like working in Ableton. Like she was driving, like sitting in the studio, like about taste, right? So like on from like the mechanics of like engineering and like using these programs and these softwares and stuff, I just never really saw anybody that looked like me. So then there was like a real revelation when I went to this like Ableton retreat in 2017. And from that point, like it was like all femme producers or non-binary producers. And I was like, oh, I can just produce my own stuff. So I like took an indefinite hiatus with my band and like started releasing all my stuff as Bianco. But now like it's been really interesting because I put a name to what I had been feeling my whole life, where I came out recently as non-binary, but I felt that way for a really long time, which has been really interesting because I've been working on a full-length mixtape for about 1.5 years, and and I had this moment where I was like, some of these lyrics still say she. Like, should I go back and change them? Like, where the mixtape's like going. It's like these were like the last final touches that we were working on back in August, and I was like, you know, like this whole thing is so much about identity, overcoming like imposter syndrome, like stepping into my voice, but also my identity, that I'm like, it's actually way more authentic to leave those. So you can see like the journey of self-discovery, like that it's like a work in progress. It takes like a while to get used to it. Like I still misgender myself all the time, like, but I just like know what feels the most comfortable to me. Mm-hmm. But it's been like a really interesting. I'm actually like, and that to me is one of, I started about like 6 months ago. I think I really took away from like the imposter syndrome feeling, like how many years I didn't waste them. I became a better musician, but how many years I could have seen myself as a producer and like gotten to this point faster. And so I started making these like reels and like TikTok videos for people to learn how to produce in like 1 minute or like 30 seconds. And it's been the #1 DM I get from new people now is like people in the LGBTQ community, especially femme producers, being like, God, thank you so much for these tips. Like I'm like producing now, like watching these things that made me like decide that I'm going to learn how to produce and stuff. And that is just like watching like people have the same realization, just way younger, has been like the best feel. Like it's crazy. It just felt like you just never really consider, oh, I can just do that. Mm-hmm. Like that's for me as well. And it sounds so simple to think that way, but like sometimes it just doesn't dawn on you, especially when you don't have like access to it super young. Your friends aren't really doing it. Like there's like, they're in school, like you fall into more of the performer category, then they encourage you to engineer and stuff. It's like imposter syndrome has just been the most interesting to debunk.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm probably considerably older than most of the folks on here. I'm 56, and like I started the music business in 1986. So there was no internet, there was no template, I didn't see somebody that looked like me who was doing anything remotely like this. So you really, for me, I had to tap into my instinct. My instinct as a kid from being a teenager was like, music's my thing. You know, my family wanted me to go into computers. They wanted me to, you know, do all sorts of other stuff. And I was like, music's my thing. So everything from sort of like high school onward was centered for me as like I did what I had to do in terms of classes and college and stuff like that. But it was always centered around music, whether it's writing, I was writing, being a journalist, writing music reviews, that which landed me a gig at Billboard, which ultimately landed me where I'm at now, which is having my own company for 30 years. So it's like, to me, it's like one of the best things I can always tell folks is like, it's great that we have the internet now and folks are globally connected, but don't let that necessarily, like, really tap into what your essence is. Your essence may not even, you might still not even see your essence. You might be able to take little things and from everywhere, and then, you know, be your own thing, be your own person. It's like when I was at Billboard, you know, I discovered a group that called Delight there. They weren't, I was in dance music. They were not what was happening at the time. So, you know, we were all sort of friends hanging out downtown, you know, Lower East Side, a little left of center. But like my perspective as a Black queer person that was into dance music, that was from the sort of the downtown ilk of things. And I actually, you know, when I was in college, I grew up playing like punk and new wave and alternative music. So that was really almost more my base. And then I got more into dance music when I came to New York. My perspective on sort of what I thought people would like wasn't what was happening at the major labels at the time. So being able to just being like, you know what, I like these guys. And I feel like there's something there. Being able to bring that around and just finding that one or two people that believe in you, believe in what your vision is, and are like, you know what, I'll support you. I see what you see. It's not proven. It's not like this was, you know, Debbie Gibson Part 2. Well, due respect to Debbie and what she was doing, but that's not the type of dance music we were doing. We were doing something that people weren't doing. It was a combination of Vogue culture and hip hop and house music and underground and New York. That wasn't on a major label before. So being able to see how that can manifest really drove home for me. You know, I left Billboard, started my own company, Peace Bisquit, to co-manage Delight and Ultra Naté at that time. Ultra Naté actually still managed 30 years later. We still work together. It proved to me that you can follow your instinct and that my Black queer vision wasn't so out of the realm of, you know, jokes. I mean, I just saw a Rolling Stone article where they named the top 500 songs ever, you know, and it's according to them, so it's a little biased for sure, but our song is on it. So for me to sit here, you know, in 2021 and like have some song that we did in 1990 that anyone even remotely still cares about, that was sort of like, you know, I don't by any means take all credit, but like I did shepherd it out to the masses.
Your queer Black instinct brought us Groove is in the Heart. Absolutely.
Exactly. So I feel like that's
Thank
really
you.
I feel like that's important to share. So it's like, you know, and like I said, I wasn't kind of on the internet, you know, like I knew some James Baldwin and some Essex Hemphill, you know, there was a couple of movies that were floating around at the time, a couple magazines, read a Village Voice or that sort of thing. But I wish that I had this community internationally to sort of like, go team. There wasn't like that. You really had to kind of find it within yourself. You know, you find your crew locally, etc., that sort of thing. Particularly in music, it's always, you know, DJing in clubs will always be my life because it is the one place with music that you can really find your community and find it pretty quickly. It's kind of like, all right, we see things alike or similarly or whatever. So I would just say, like, you know, finding your own fortitude and what we all might want and respond to tomorrow might not be here right now. You may be the catalyst to bring it to us. So just believe that. So, you know, take in what you can, but like you all might be kind of bringing us the next big thing. You know, it's like it's always there. So I always feel like it's always there to kind of to manifest and to bring forward.
I just have to say the fact that like a queer Black man brought us, like it helped facilitate that, makes me love the song so much more. But I already fucking stan that song. So thank you, Bill. Thank you for doing us that honor.
I mean, I can't play it either. So I'm just I've heard it too many times. But I appreciate the love that it gives the world. It's all good. So I hear you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Bill, you kind of just spoke on this with, you know, like you said, your Black queer intuition saying go this way and not necessarily having a blueprint for it, but saying like this is the direction. I feel like there, like under the under the queer experience, there is no blueprint for so many things. So I really like to sort of dive into how each of our participants on this call have allowed their identity and their experience change the way you approach the music industry. We've already addressed that there is that aspect of in-group, out-group. There is that aspect of, unless you're a cishet white man, you're not necessarily going to have the same aspects of networking that each of y'all do on this call. So who does anyone want to speak to sort of how their experience and identity has helped them maneuver, or what they've learned in making it a more inclusive space?
I would just say very briefly that I learned a really long time ago. I feel like the fortunate thing about having success really early is that you learned a lot of these things real quick when certain projects or managers would be getting bigger budgets than you, and you're kind of like, well, why isn't my group being given the same attention? So you learn a lot. I learned a lot very quickly, and so when you find out, again, kind of referring to that before, like when you kind of find out what the rules of the game are, then that's when you really do use your gifts, I say, to sort of maneuver a little bit differently. So whether it's being in queer spaces, being in cis spaces, but having that sort of queer perspective or person of color. You know, I've worked in a lot of different spaces in terms of music, in terms of R&B music and dance. So coming to the well, I should speak for myself. I recognized very early on that I have a very specific perspective on all this, and it would be not fair for me to kind of utilize that when doing business, whether I'm working with someone, whether I'm helping someone, whether I'm consulting someone. I think it really just informs how you make your decisions, just business-wise, and who you bring up. You know, it's like I've been in a fortunate place to kind of produce projects or consult, and I will go out of my way to bring in some kids that I know maybe didn't get an opportunity or would not necessarily have been given an opportunity or chance. So I would just say like that it completely informs kind of decisions that are being made now, for sure, 100%.
For me, I would say that when I started to gain a little bit more traction in the bass scene in 2019, there was definitely a little pushback from like people I would hear like through the grapevine, where people were like, oh, so his thing is that like he's the gay DJ, that's like his shtick. And I'm like, sure, but like also like that's who I am. And I think now after like the first year of kind of people being like, oh, that's his gimmick, that's his thing, now I feel like I've passed this threshold where there's like a lot of people that are just like, no, like we are so thankful that you do that the way that you do it. And at first, you know, there was definitely it took a minute, I think, for people to get it, but I mean the timing for me is great because it's, you know, we're in 2020 in the 2020s, and like it's you know, accepted and like applauded now. So I've been able to kind of like watch it kind of switch for me, where people are like, okay, we don't take him seriously, in the way that I know my like women friends and, you know, non-binary friends that are like femme presenting get the same shit, where it's like, you didn't produce that for yourself, or like I've gotten it in my own small way as just a gay man. But now I'm lucky to have this place of privilege as someone who can play even just small headline shows in smaller places. So our next thing that we want to implement is an inclusion rider whenever I am the headliner, just because it's like, okay, now I have this spot that I know is like a duty. So here I go. If I'm going to be playing a show, you need to have POC on the lineup, you need to have women, and you need to have like any mix of that, or like queer people, including myself. And that's kind of the way that I've realized, like, oh my God, you got your foot in the door. Now you can like slowly, in your small part, even if it's just like a 200 cap show or 100 cap show, you can make sure, because you're the person coming, that like the change is happening somewhere. And that's kind of our team's next big thing, where we're just like, now we can do that work each time we go somewhere. So that's been really important to me.
I have a question for you, Brandon. For what you're talking, like, it also, I mean, if you're producing an event, I'm not gonna say ultimately, but it's about your fans having a good time and people attending having a great time. It's also about generating income. So
It is.
when you're making those decisions, like you can't, I mean, yeah, because you can, but like you can't just kind of like, I'm just gonna put my cousin Joe on.
No,
then,
yeah.
you know,
Well, so I'm.
It takes of this conversation. It's kind of like, it's like you also have to kind of like, you can be inclusive, but you also like you gotta hit the you gotta
exactly.
hit it.
So for me, I'm kind of thankful that, I mean, I do have a lot of queer, like LGBTQ friends in music that travel a lot. So like that is a great point, because it's like we still want the taste, and like the overall event needs to be popping, because that's just important. But I think for me, it's been great. Like, so I'm managed by a queer man. He manages one of my best friends who's a lesbian. And like, we together have like literally from, at least in our areas, from the ground up, experience kind of the same things, where like people would maybe take us less seriously because of these, you know, stamps that are on our person. And it's like, I guess just having good people around me and other queer people that are like, no, this is going to be great, has made it easier to make sure if we are curating something, we're getting good people, obviously. But yeah, that's a great, I'm definitely going to be probably taking that as we go with each time we put an inclusion rider in the contract and stuff like that.
The good news is more people exist now that fit that quota. We just got to expose them, honestly. Like, there's like, I think experientially, like a couple things that I've really noticed is the support systems falling into place for like educating people or just exposing like their talents. One organization I want to call out is FemHouse. FemHouse has like really helped the gender gap in general with like education, and then also exposure for like femme electronic producers. They're like so involved. They're run by like LPGOB, who is a queer electronic DJ artist. But yeah, it's like I've started to notice all these organizations popping up, and if you're following them, you're like getting tuned into like all these up and coming artists and stuff that are like always doing their live streams and stuff. So in some ways, like the pandemic kind of helped expose the disparities and sort of level the playing field a little bit more in terms of like you didn't need these big shows. You could use these live streams. You got plugged into these networks, and then hopefully it translates as the world is opening up into like more access to those big shows and stuff. I mean, that's what we're all hoping for, I guess.
I've been watching a little bit of the same old with the bookings as things are opening up. It's definitely been a little bit frustrating on this side. I'm like, oh, I see we haven't learned too much from the pandemic. I've been watching some of the festival lineups. I'm like, okay, so were all of the black squares and everything, was that all talk? You know, like all the Me Too movement. It's like, was it all talk? Because this lineup is looking very samey. Just throw
Oh gosh, I had the funniest conversation with this huge music manager. He's like represents like really, really big electronic names, not all white, but all male, right? So I had too many glasses of wine one night, and we were at a party, and I was just like, I have a question for you. Like, we're like friends. So I was like, I have a question for you. Like, do you feel now that like going into those rooms, you know, like the rooms with the big label people, big festival, big agents, big, like, do you think that we're at the point now where it's not talk anymore? Like, if you have a queer, like, femme or like person of color artist that like you use that actually works in your favor for like the getting that artist like signed or getting that artist on that big lineup or whatever. Like, do you think like all of that 2020 social change, like, do you feel like you're better armed like to like get that femme producer signed? And his response was, well, I don't represent any female artists because I don't actually have enough capacity right now. So I was like, literally, that's not what I asked. I just said, because you're in.
But you got your answer. You got your answer.
Which was what I wanted to say. Like, it's like, okay, so I have noticed a lot of, especially femme producers or like queer producers going viral on TikTok or on Instagram and stuff. And so there's a lot more visibility. But what I've also noticed is that because I'm in LA and I'm in those like, in some of these like big publishing networks, that's not translating to like the Justin Bieber session. That's not translating to like
The money
the
session.
really big
The money.
yeah. They're not, and that was kind of like why 3 Glasses of Wine Deep, I was like, do you think that actually now is working in our favor? But behind closed doors, like it's not actually getting people paid yet. So it was a lot of performativeness. And what sucks about it is like, okay, cool. Like we're just relegating a lot of this queer community and like a lot of like the femme presenting people to the like Instagram influencer lifestyle, that they have to like come up with all of their own financing and stuff by using this stuff where like the other artists have access to like these label structures or these big opening slots on tours. Yeah, exactly. So I've had like a moment earlier this year where I got really pissed off for a minute because I was just like, fuck, we're just working 10 times harder to like make sure our reach is there, and the money is just handed to someone with like far less following, far less development, just because of like the power structures that already exist.
Well, they were really good friends with the one dude or something like that. You know, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean by like, it doesn't really, it's often, and I don't want to be a pessimist, but it's like, it often, your talent does not necessarily translate to those numbers or get in that room, and you can be just as good as Red One. It doesn't matter. It's like, you really have to kind of, it's constantly chipping away at the block until, I always say this, until you have something they want. I've fortunately been in, I've worked with, some singer-songwriters that some of these big guys wanted. So we had some hits. We had some #1 hits and with some of the big guys, but it's because I work with folks that they wanted at that time. It wasn't because Bill's a great guy or, we have this track and we want to give it to him. It's kind of like, I just happen to be working with, not happen to be, I kind of formulate these relationships, but like timing, it was just sort of like, boom. But it's like, once you had the hit single with them, it's not like my phone was ringing like after we had huge top 10 success. Not like they were like, we love working with you. What else you got? Like that wasn't the conversation. But I feel like what you're saying, like that is the conversation within the boy group. With the boys, they're all kind of like, yay, we did this. Let's do it again. Like that's the vibe with the boys. When you're outside, when you're circling or outside, it's kind of like I said, you get invited to the table, but don't get too comfortable because they will take away your place setting when the meal is finished. So,
and that actually, yes.
What's that?
Right. It's like a special guest, you said, Bianco?
You're the special guest, not the key player, not the main character.
The key is to get your own table. The key is to try to make your own table.
Absolutely. Rather than fighting for a seat, sometimes you got to make your own. When you guys speak of that sort of performative activism, I feel like the other side of that, which is what y'all were just sort of dabbling into, is the aspect of like tokenism. Do you feel like we've moved into a space of where, we'll have a, check box for some piece of pride, or we'll make sure to highlight artists during Pride Month, but not necessarily make sure we have representation throughout the calendar year. Do y'all have any sort of personal or stories or experiences to share with that and kind of dive into what that might look like in reality?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like I think that a lot of the times too, whenever we discuss inclusion in a lot of spaces, I had to learn how to have a lot of boundaries when it comes to my sexuality, because I think that when people do want to showcase, like, oh, let's showcase a bisexual woman, for example, they usually want to showcase it in a way where it is very performative, where it is something that is more pleasing to cis straight men, instead of it being something that it's like a genuine artist who's really representing themselves as a queer person. But so we have a lot of like music videos and things where people will want to use people who are presenting but perhaps lesbian or bisexual, but they'll just use them like for a kissing scene, you know what I mean, to promote that that sexual aspect of
It's
it.
still the cis-het male gaze that's happening in the action of it.
And we see that a lot with rappers and with pop stars and stuff, where it's just like this one kissing moment in the video, and that solidifies their sexuality inside the industry. And that aspect, I feel like, does feel like very not very inclusive, and it kind of feels like it's made for the male gaze, and like it's not like genuine, you know. So there's a lot of token artists, I would say, that present that a lot. And I know that that's probably something that's not even coming from them, but you know, labels and different people want to market you like, oh, let's market your sexuality, but in a way where it's acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, generally we're kind of interesting people because we're private but we're open. So like there is amounts of us that you will see, and people are like, oh my God, you have no problem, you know, maybe being a little semi-naked in the sense of, you know, wearing a leotard or something. So they think that just because you're still comfortable maybe in your body, that it's not still a fight, or it's still not a battle, or that you're comfortable in every other aspect. And when it comes down to when people ask us to do some stuff, sometimes we be careful what we take on, because we don't want to be that token. We don't want to be like not represented in the right way, because every representation doesn't matter if it's the wrong people that are doing it not for genuine reasons. And you'll see it. You'll see when it's not genuine.
Like, we are naturally who we are. Like, each and every one of us is naturally who we are. You know what I mean? So we always say, like, whenever it comes to being in, like, representing ourselves as, you know, who we are, that we don't have to, you know, put on a show for like the male gaze and like make a kissing scene in a video and stuff like that. Like, no, this is who we are, and you know what I mean? Like, it's not made for marketing purposes. You know, we need to just like kind of normalize. I think the more we normalize things in a way where it's organic, like, hey, I'm married to this person, or I'm, you know what I mean? This is a family. This is a regular thing. This is an everyday thing, and it's not, you know, a scene in a movie or a video to make people like, ooh, she's an edgy character, or they're an edgy character. Look, they just made out with the same gender. You know what I mean? So I think that
and you know, also, excuse my ADHD if I jump off the topics a bit, but
it's a conversation. Good.
Just even talking about kind of like, again, because like Bill, you brought up different stuff about like even like and I love what you said, Brandon, about when you hire people and you named like on other people, because that's another thing. Is like, we're like dealing with so many battles, being from you know, being a part of the transatlantic slave trade, and you know, our ancestors that are from the Caribbean, or are Afro-American. Like, we already are fighting. We've been fighting for like 400 years in this country to even be seen. So sometimes I'm having conversations with my friends who might have their parents might have immigrated here for some time, and they'll talk about having representation, and I'm like, woo, 400 years and there's still not proper representation of we're still not like, there's award shows that come on and we still don't mention Josephine Baker, we still don't mention Tina Turner. They don't have tributes. These are, I watch every awards show, I'm still waiting for Prince and all these different icons to have representation, to be seen. So it's like you're fighting that, you're fighting just 400 years of tension already, and then you're also fighting the fact that like Peter's saying, you know, with our sexuality, then that's also another thing. So it's like you have to also be, you know, smart. So like what Brandon said, so if it's not always somebody that represents maybe our sexuality or something, it's somebody who is, you know, a brown person and will understand like what we stand for, because like those, it's like an endless group or battle sometimes.
It's like they're basically also, I like that you highlighted, like even within these discussions, even within the LGBTQIA community, beyond that, even, you know, there's still like, you know, people will give jobs and things to other LGBT people who maybe aren't of color, or, you know, so there's always like many divisions, you know, within. So it's just good, again, that we have these open discussions.
I personally want to say, like, I know for a fact that I've had a quicker ride in an EDM based scene, even as like the token gay man, but I know it was easier because I'm also like white and like you can tell I'm a boy. So like it's for other people in the booking scene, like I know it was easier for them to digest me than it was for queer POC friends of mine that are doing similar things and having a harder time. Like I've literally heard grapevine conversations where it's like bookers are like, well, the gays are in now, so we should book him. And I'm like, that's great for me, but like in reality, it's like, I obviously, you're gonna go do those things to get your message out there, but it can be disheartening because you're like, man, I just wish it was not even like this is it. It's like, you are fucking here because you deserve it. And we should have several other people of all different types, you know, races, sexualities doing the same thing. So that's kind of my take.
I would also say to what you're saying, that don't look to mainstream media for representations of yourself. So I don't, as much as I would love, you know, different medleys for different folks and performances on award shows and stuff, I look, it's like candy. I look at it as candy. I don't look at it for sustenance. And so it's important for you as artists coming up that you mentioned Josephine Baker and that you mentioned Prince and whoever is inspiring you, and that you understand the shoulders that you stand on. That's to me is what's really important in these sorts of conversations, because I'm not expecting some award show to have some tribute to James Baldwin, even though his words constantly are resonating in my brain at all times. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. They don't have to. I can say it whenever I have the opportunity to say it. Or whatever musician or, you know, that may inspire me, or producer, et cetera, so on and so forth. So I think, you know, it's nice to want that. You know, you want to see yourself reflected back, but you're not always going to get it. And you're definitely not always going to get it from mainstream organizations that are really about the money. They're really about the money and their bottom line. So, you know, you take from it what you can, but I would definitely just be like, use your platforms to kind of, you know, turn somebody on. Somebody could be watching this and not know who Josephine Baker is, and I've heard you mention her a couple of times, and go look her up and be like, oh, that's why she mentioned her. You know what I'm saying? Like that to me is what's really important. That's how you keep these that energy and these legacies alive. You know.
Funny that you said that though, because actually we grew up and like our father would just basically be like, you know, not to look for these platforms. I think these are conversations you like early have in our communities. You know, sometimes it's like my parents would say like, you know, don't expect. Like, I still don't know why people go so crazy over certain awards when, you know, for so many years we've seen like the outcome. So my parents always just be like, you know, you have to just create your own work. You shouldn't like the status of how good your music is. Oh, I didn't win this award, so my music isn't good. Well, you have millions of people who think your music is good. So
and it's just
I
about
definitely
the
agree.
people.
Yes, it's the people. And it's the people who support you.
100%. And also, you know, with all due respect to our LGBTQI community, we're not always so supportive of each other either. So there's also that. It's like, it's not always just like kumbayaing down to the finish line. You're like, let's be clear. Like sometimes, you know, a bitch got an axe out for you too, because you just made a move. So let's be clear on that. Like it's not, I'm not this sort of like Pollyanna-ish version of the LGBTQI community in whatever genre of music that you're in. Sometimes, you know, fake, you know what I'm saying? You know, folks that come at you from all sides, it don't matter. It's like, with a great quote from Zora Neale Hurston that can sort of be amended however you want. Like, all my skin folk ain't kinfolk. So however you want to, you know, that's sort of kind of the case. You always have to kind of keep your eye out, so.
Definitely. And that's absolutely how that, you know, how tokenism and stuff like that prevails, because not all skin folk is kinfolk, or any adaptation of that. Well, just to switch gears, unless anyone has anything else to share on the piece of, you know, seat at the table or creating your own table. I do sort of want to mention or want to go into something that y'all sort of have already mentioned, but when we look for sort of the validation of mainstream media, we've gone over that might not be always represented. However, y'all, Bebi Monsuta, y'all both touched on this, how now we have the validation of so many followers and things like that online, because we all have our own different communities and environments in real life and digitally. I just want to sort of go into what it's been like having to sort of, and Bianco, you might be able to speak to this a bit more personally, sort of growing and sharing your identity while you're, you know, with the lens of the public. Like, you do have strangers watching you. How has that sort of, how's that experience been? Like, do you ever have moments where you have to let your haters be your motivators, or are you the kind to just sort of shut it off and let it go? And, you know, this is really a question for everyone. And yeah, does anyone have any specific sort of approach when it comes to followers?
Yeah, I will say, so I had a couple of pieces of content go viral that were me doing these loops, like these, where I'll play like 6 different instruments and I'll just like loop things and create like these tracks. And one of them got reposted by this big like equipment company, musical equipment company. So like, I mean, that's like your NAMM audience, which is all like straight white dudes who love rock and roll. Like, so I had to stop. At first I was like so excited that the video was like going viral, and I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. And, like, so many likes on it and stuff. And then I started reading the comments, and it was like just so many trolls, like, this is fucking fake, like fucking, I would expect it to be fake. The person doesn't even know their gender, they're an it, blah blah blah, like all this like horrible stuff. And then I noticed that there was like but it was all for men, all of it, everything was for men who were just like, bitch doesn't know what they're doing, this is fake, this is blah blah blah. And it was so, I was just like, wow, this is like crazy. Like, and I tend to be pretty so I just stopped reading the comments. But then I noticed that there were a lot of people sliding into my DMs like, protect, don't let the haters like hate, like blah blah, I love your account, all this stuff. And it was just, it's so interesting because I actually noticed a lot of like vigilantism amongst like other people in my situation, or like who are just like weren't cis white men. And they were like all just like encouraging and keep going and stuff. And I was like, man, I'm not upset. Like, I just got a bunch of, like, got like 10 grand worth of free gear out of that video. Like, let them sit and like send those comments. But it actually is like, because that was successful, we've like moved a lot of my social strategy into loops and performances and stuff like that. So I actually have been encountering it quite a bit, but I just like ignore it. But it's been really interesting, like the couch trolls like that are just, and it's so especially on the videos where I'm explaining how to sidechain in 60 seconds, or like, this is my vocal chain rundown. The mansplaining that happens, it only happens for men. Like, people telling me like, you should put the gate on your vocal chain before blah blah blah. And it's just like, I've never seen a woman or non-binary person slide into the comments with any framing of any question. That's not the right way to do it. Not once. And I've had like 30,000 comments in like 1 month. Like, we have an intern to field through them. So like, there's never been anybody other than a man telling me that I'm doing something wrong in production, which is really, it's so funny when people say that mansplaining still doesn't exist, and it's just like so blatantly obvious, like statistically, when you look at it. Because even if a woman or queer, somebody were to like speak in a comment, they'd be like, that's interesting, I actually do it like this. Like, it's like, but it's not like you should. It's like, that's really interesting, I'm going to try it that way, but I actually do it like this. It's so interesting how we frame our questions or our expertise as people in a minority position. We're just like constantly apologizing, or like sort of making it acceptable for us to be experts at what we're doing. So yeah,
I'm so sorry that I know this. I'm so sorry that I know how to do this, but
yeah. It's wild. But I actually have noticed, like, I feel the most exhausted. I tend to be pretty politically outspoken and like a pretty loud ally on my Instagram, especially my stories. And I actually am very grateful for all of Instagram's parameters that they put in place for like fielding through your DMs, because there is some like violent DMs I've gotten in response to like anything about like pro-choice or like anything about like LGBTQ awareness, or like it's like there are some people out there that like follow me that are just very like, so I'm able to now like filter all of that out, which I feel has been very valuable for my mental health. Because the thing is, like, for all of the reasons that we've been talking about, one of the biggest vehicles for myself as an artist and my success has been social media, because haven't been able to access the same like opportunities as straight white men in the same position. So I've been like using that as like my like Trojan horse into the industry. And so I have to be in my DMs. Also, like all of my collaborations come with big artists come from like sliding into each other's DMs and starting to follow each other and stuff. And it's like, so it actually was kind of an assault on a lot of my mental health when I had like some of these really violent like comments and stuff and no utilities to like filter through them.
I have a question for you. Since you present as female, when you do your socials, are you editing or monitoring how you physically present yourself in terms of like what you wear or how you wear your hair? Does that like has these sort of comments affected that at all in any way? Okay.
No, honestly, I'm like, I know that I'm femme presenting. It's funny because everybody who knows me is like, man, if I look at a picture of you or watch a video, I think you're one way. And then I hang out with you and I'm like, suddenly I get the whole non-binary situation. Cause I'm just like, I guess my energy is just so fluid, but I just wear what I want to wear and what I feel comfortable wearing. However, what's interesting about that is like, how much of what I feel comfortable wearing or presenting myself comes from like my own like internalized like notions of what works for me because of like a patriarchal system of power, right? So I'm like, I have had some of those moments where I'm like, is what I'm comfortable with just because I have benefited from it in the past as like being in such a cis white male dominated culture. And so I'm like, I'll unpack that as I work through it. So right now, I just wear what I feel. But actually, I do feel like there was not actually I always felt uncomfortable in my skin or I don't know how to present it. I always felt like there was a word missing for my experience that I like so often was like people would be like, oh yeah, she's a chick, but like kind of like a dude in so many ways too. Like I know that this sounds stupid to even like create a binary around traits, but like I ride motorcycles and fix them in my backyard. I'm a producer. I'm the person who installs all the furniture always, like rewires lights. Like I've always been very engineering heavy in just everything I choose. And I know that that's not a binaryism for gender, but it's just like people have always said that like I don't know. So I felt that like when all of a sudden I was like, you can be femme present. That's the word for it. It's literally, I identify, I'm not super attached to my genitals. I could have a penis, I'd be fine. I have a vagina, I'm fine. Like, so like that, like feeling, I'm like, wow, that really makes sense. I guess it is non-binary, but I'd never thought it was me because I am comfortable femme presenting and have benefited from that. So I met a femme presenting non-binary person last summer that really opened up my mind to like, that's the word that you've been missing. Like, that's who you are. And then when Demi Lovato came out, I was like, that's literally the experience that I've always had in my life, you know? But Demi has like modified her appearance to appear more non-binary since they've come out. But I'm like, I might, if I feel comfortable at some point, but right now I'm just like going through life, experiencing things. And I tell you, like, it's like a Goldilocks feeling where I'm like, man, she just never felt right. And like, they just feel so right. It's so comfortable.
That's super
like,
awesome. I would say for our community, for the LGBTQI community, use what you got to get what you want. Don't let anybody monitor or edit. Like this is the incarnation you're in this time. Use it in a positive way. Don't hurt nobody. But like do what you gotta do. Do what you gotta do. I mean, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
It's funny, it's a house of cards, because once you start to be like, wait, motorcycles aren't male driven, then you're like, wait, like long hair shouldn't be male driven. It's so stupid. You start to like unravel the whole outfit. Like you realize like these things that you thought were traditionally masculine or feminine, like it's all bullshit anyways. It's like really how you feel in your body, and like with your body and your identity and like your fluidity. And so it really just becomes like even those appearance like indicators, really those are just us signaling that we are this way, but like you can still be that way without those signals. I think
people respond to those signals though too. And as we're talking about kind of being in the business, it's important to understand like how people are going to respond to certain signals, even as artificial as they may be, in reference to work or getting a gig or when you walk into a meeting. You know, I've walked into a meeting with a very big executive that owned a record company and totally came on to me at the end of the meeting. And we're talking about doing a gig, or not a gig, like signing my band. And like at the end, if somebody's just standing just a little too close to you as they're saying goodbye, and I'm just thinking like, is this guy coming on to me? Like that sort of, and it's because I presented as just sort of like this cool queer kid at the time. It was just sort of like, this is my band. I'm like, I'm really about the music. But like how those visual signals, like you say, are really important, because for you to understand how people kind of may respond to them, and also to kind of keep you out of situations that you may not want to be in. Not saying that you should edit yourself, but just know like someone may respond in a certain way. Again, it's just about kind of almost like reading the room sort of thing sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, there's always the, industry aspect of the music industry as well. So what were you going to say?
Yeah, when it comes to social media, we've never actually pretty much had that kind of experience. But I think being aware of what we look like, as we said, like we are not trying to really take up too many spaces where there are people who are in drag, or there are people who are super like, just living their life in the clothing and the fashion that they're comfortable with. Like for us, we're very aware that we are, women, and that's what we present. And so what we try to really do is just like have these kind of discussions, or just try to make, for us, we like fight for just being seen as not anything gimmicky. It's just normal, and we don't really want to take up I feel like too much space from people who might really need to be themselves, and they like represent, because there is privilege in us, being females and wearing the leotards and having movies out, and
there's privilege in us. For most people perceiving us as just straight, women, cis women. So just understanding that helps us make space also for our trans sisters and brothers and everyone else who has like these other this much broader thing that they're dealing with, and holding space for them and knowing who we are. So, and that doesn't invalidate who we are. That doesn't invalidate us, but it's just being aware, like, when you're like, as Brandon, you said, being a white person and being LGBT, you are aware of that. So, when people approach you, you're like, yeah, approach me, but, approach these other people too. So, yeah, and it doesn't invalidate your experience or mine or any of ours. It's just
using our voice,
yes, to hold space. Like, hey, you're holding space for me, but I'm also very feminine presenting. Hold space for this other person too. Thank you.
I love that. So going back to the original question of just like how we would deal with just like haters, or obviously on paper, haters always my motivators, but IRL, I'm an emotional bitch. So like, it's one of those, it's one of those things where like, for me in my regular life, I've had, you know, I was out by the time I was 14. I played with Barbies, you know, she came out with broken wrists, but it's one of those things where I've experienced more of that in my regular life than I have really in the music industry. And I would say I'm probably very lucky for the time period I've been in, because I'll hear like, kind of, to me, it's a horror story where it's like, friends of mine who maybe are still closeted to this day in music, like, they are because when they came out, like labels dropped them, or someone on their old, you know, booking agency tried to like tell their new booking agency that they're queer and that they're not going to go far. Like, it's like, I'll hear these things, both on manager and like for artist side. And for me, I'm just always like, I am so freaking lucky that this thing that is obviously just part of me and me being queer, like, is accepted in this day and age. But I still feel for the people that get it, and it's still happening, you know, but it's like, I feel very lucky that mine has been on a smaller scale. When it comes to now, it's like, I guess getting hate at a younger age, kind of like if someone calls me the F slur online, like, I'm like, thank you, I know, like, move forward. You know, like that kind of stuff is way easier because I think stuff I've went through now. But it really is just averting your eyes, knowing when to delete, knowing when to not respond to the troll. All of that stuff is so crucial to your own mental health and your own just like, it's like, oh, I can literally shut this phone off. Like, boom, problem solved.
Yeah, that's the same thing we always feel like when it comes to like trolls on social media. Like, sometimes it's not even worth mentioning, you know, because, you know, once you realize that a lot of things in life are just projection, there's a lot of people going through their own things. Like when people troll us on social media, you know, because our little sister posted us, you know, well, she's like a little sister to us, Ming, and people just started trolling us. And, you know, for me, every bad comment that we got, we fell out laughing. And not just that, I just wished everyone great things. Like, they can comment something mean, and sometimes I will respond like, you know, I hope you're healed. I hope that you have a blessed day.
Go with God.
Clearly, people come on social media to get off their chest, you know, the things that they can't say to their mom, their dad, their brother, their sister, whatever's going on in their personal life. So, you know, once you realize, oh, they're just trolling, and you just accept whatever it is that they're saying, like, a lot of people were body shaming us, and we were just like, yep,
for
you're
instance,
right.
like one comment, it cracks me up to this day, but when we dropped our song, because we're big on body positivity, we're okay with the surgery, also with the Photoshop, whatever makes you feel good. But we also posted our video, and our little sister posted it, and it was funny because somebody has basically we're trying to say they always ask us if we have BBLs and stuff, so
we don't.
They don't, but I wish, but we don't. They said if my ass fell, they said her ass taste. And that cracks me up so bad. Like, it's so free to laugh because it was so funny. And I laugh because I make jokes all the time, because when people go like, oh, where did your teeth go? And I'm like,
my ass.
It's like a big flat ass. That's what I call it.
And it's just a joke.
And it was just funny.
I can relate, just because we put out a music video in May or in June, and it was like, it's me in giant pigtails being gay as hell and rapping and stuff. And like, YouTube, kind of a cesspool when it comes to the comment section. Like, people can say whatever they want there. But for me, I noticed I turned to leave because I was rolling through it and like laughing my ass off. I was like, you know, they're just like, this is the spawn of Satan. And I'm like, yes, we're doing something right.
I'm always like, hell yeah, I am.
I would definitely, I would also add to that, like, I've worked with an artist named Caswell, who's a white rapper. We worked for about 10 years, and I put out his very first record, and worked with Amanda Lepore for 10 years and did a bunch of stuff with her. And I would say my experience with social media and videos and stuff was like, us getting music videos out on them, really, the positive comments and people seeing them and being like, oh my God, I love Ice Cream Truck or whatever. it was like kids, their parents, as well as the queers. So that was sort of really sort of reaffirming, particularly for an artist like Caswell, who, again, this is when we first started, you know, a white gay rapper was like an anomaly. And the LGBTQ community was actually one of the last to come on board. We were actually coming out of the electroclash scene at that time. And that's where we were getting our support with like acts like Avenue D and Fisher Spooner, Larry T, and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, right now when you go to a queer club, you hear rap and you hear a lot of different sounds. Back then, it's like, you would get fired if you were a DJ playing any sort of hip hop or anything that sounded Black or inspired by Black. Like, that's how kind of stringent a lot of the rules at kind of LGBTQ clubs were. So, and that wasn't very long ago. It feels very like dated now, but like, people would get fired for playing hip hop. So when working with someone like Caswell, who's not only was doing hip hop, but is also a white gay rapper, like, the doors didn't fly open. People weren't like, come on over here, we love you. Like, that wasn't the case. It was like the LGBT community was literally one of the last folks to get on board. And so when we had a kind of a record that finally sort of went viral, like Ice Cream Truck, what was really sort of reaffirming for us was like, okay, this wasn't for naught. We did think that this idea would work, and to have like literally have kids, their parents, as well as our community embrace the song and just the video and stuff like that. It was really reassuring. It was kind of like, okay, so it wasn't an idiot for sort of like thinking that this could work and that people would like it. So I just wanted to kind of give a different perspective. It was really just sort of like, okay, we did something good here.
Yeah.
So
you gotta slap the taste into the scenes. If they're not ready for it, you just gotta bring it to them. And I mean, I recently was asked to play my first circuit party, and and I'm like, girl, those areas still exist. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if me getting on stage and rapping aggressively at them is gonna go over. You know, they might want to just hear Rain on Me. So I'm gonna do it. But
they need it. They need
exactly. You just gotta wrap it into them. Hit them with the face.
Yes. Well, thank y'all so much. We'd love to hear all of that. Just to switch gears once again, just a little bit. I kind of want to go into, you know, the future, where we are now. Can we, does anyone have any sort of artists that should be on our radar, and any friends, peers, or LGBTQIA plus people that you're like, yes, this is who you need to listen to, watch out for, look at right now? Who would you point our audiences to?
Does anybody know Amor Kismet?
Yes.
Okay, Amor Kismet, now the youngest artist to ever play Lollapalooza, and they're just this incredible non-binary, I think 17-year-old, and they're seriously just smashing barriers.
Yes.
And they're so inspiring. I would say if you like any sort of electronic music, definitely look up More Kismet. Just look them up in general because they're fucking amazing.
Well, and quickly on More Kismet for our viewers, if you're interested in seeing more from them, they actually featured on our UnMute mental health and music episodes. So if you
there we go.
YouTube page,
and then for me, from like the past and to me to this day, I am like, I ride so hard for Mickey Blanco and Cakes Tequila, who are amazing artists. And those were people that when I was 16 and living in the sticks, Northern Michigan, like I saw their videos and was like, oh my God, this is like what I want to do with my life. So I would say, yeah, just those three artists are like my heart.
Love that. And let me make a quick correction. More actually featured on our race and music episode. So it was our first one. More set the tone quite well. But yeah, I want to make sure to pass the mic to any other peeps that should be on our radar.
I'm just gonna throw a little shout out to my homegirl, Honey Dijon. She's trans and killing it with fashion and music and just being in everyone's face and reaching back. And she's doing ad campaigns and getting Cakes to do it and bringing our girl Connie, and you know, she's really, you know, I've known her for forever, and she is really doing a great job of sort of balancing being on the A-list and still reaching back and remembering where she came from. So I love her to death. And so
she did that thing with Madonna in New York recently. Yeah. Legend status, absolutely.
Legend. And she's one of us, so that's why it's like we've literally watched the phoenix rise out of the ash. So it's a beautiful thing to see, and I love to support.
Well, this is just they're already popular, but I just think that regardless, I just feel they're gonna be amazing, and that's like Victoria Monet.
Oh yes,
I just have to say, like, absolutely what they're doing for like R&B music, what they're doing for like, you know, that old school kind of brown American tunes and stuff. Just, you know, some people have to keep it alive, you know.
And she is bisexual. I would also say, even though they also are very popular, Ludmilla, she's an artist from Brazil. I don't know if you guys know of her, but she's amazing, and she's married. And she is exactly she just showcases who she is in such an organic way.
Culturally too, she tags in the favela. She tags in the cultural aspects of them, like.
And she highlights a different Brazil, definitely, beautifully in her music.
And that's just something we can't ever leave behind, you know. It's like the culture too. So she's amazing. And Rina Sawayama.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Who's also in John Wick, and they're also really amazing.
Watch them. Had no followers.
She's a Wick girl now. Yeah, she's gonna be a Wick girl, baby. I'm ready.
I just feel like they're our baby, and like, you know, when you watch somebody like grow and like their followers being nothing to something, and it's just like,
that's so beautiful.
Go get it.
And especially like a Japanese pop star, like that means so much to us.
We've never seen even
it.
though like Bill says you can't wait for that representation, you know.
But it is a good one, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in love with Arlo Parks. I think they are just so incredible. They just won the Mercury Prize, so obviously everybody thinks they're incredible at this point. But I just think, you know, I gotta say one thing though, in the coverage for the Mercury Prize, one of the most beautiful and effortless things about that album was how effortlessly they talked about their girlfriend and falling in love with women who didn't love them back, and like the pains of that. I mean, that still happens to me. I fall in love with women who don't love me back or just think I'm a friend or whatever. But you're like, she just really captured that narrative. And I noticed how in the press they were just like, of young love, so much emphasis on young love and not on queer love and the perils of queer love. And the navigating queer love at a young age, especially when you're in the closet still. And like that album just had so much like genuine narration to it. It was really just, it deserved all of that. And then I want to call out, like, I've actually had the honor of working with her. She's on one of the tracks on my upcoming mixtape, but Kalina Zanders is one of it. Guys, I have produced.
She's so good. She's so good. She's so good.
Oh my God.
She's amazing. Kalina's such a baddie. Just gotta say that, sorry.
Her voice is the best voice I have ever worked with. Literally, like everything. At one point in the studio, she even was like, "Damn, I'm good."
Love that.
Yes.
She's so good. Her voice is just. She calls herself like the Whoopi Goldberg of EDM. She's like fucking so in all of the, like, she's such a great spokesperson for the queer community. She's such a great spokesperson for people of color. She's fucking just awesome. And her voice is untouchable. And so honestly, I'm like, I've been blessed with the track with Kalina Zanders for like this whole mixtape, because it's honestly, it ended up being like the last big single that we're going to release in leading up to it, and I was like, I couldn't pick a better one. But yeah, those are my two right now that I'm just like, really, if you don't know Arlo Parks and if you don't know Kalina Zanders, everybody will at this time next year probably.
And I want to throw Sam Sparrow in the mix too. He's an old friend, and he's been kind of popping music out for a minute. He has his most recent stuff's been really good when you're talking on a sort of R&B pop tip as well. You just reminded me of that as well. He's been out here for a minute, but he's still making great music.
Love it. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. Before we do go today, I want to ask one more question for each of you guys to sort of go around. Yeah, do y'all have any words of wisdom for the gabies, babies, and babies out there in the industry? What would you want to tell them?
I would tell them to definitely rewrite your own path. Nobody could tell your story but you. And you know, to keep on shining and keep on speaking and taking up space.
And adding to those words, culture geek over here, I'm just gonna always say to make sure that you just don't forget your roots, you know. And even if your roots are biased on, you know, maybe what you believe in, I say, like, you know, you have to have a patient heart for people. It's difficult. It's very hard. It's super hard. But you have to have a patient heart for people, because at the end of the day, we're all ignorant, and sometimes we don't know why we're here on this planet and what is right and wrong, and we're just all conditioned in different ways. So we have to just be really patient with each other. Yes, also have patient with other people in the LGBT community, because they are also there's times of racism, there's times of still misogyny, and there's times it doesn't mean everyone in the community is perfect. Like in any community, we just have to be able to have discussions, not be so offended by certain words, but just open to discussions is very important. And I'm gonna say that in the beginning of this conversation, I had an anxiety ADHD moment. So I just also that mental health is real, and you know, navigating, staying on track.
Yes,
conversation.
and that happens.
But yes, be definitely patient. Patience is so major key. Like, we have to not be so quick to cancel everybody. We have to be open to having conversations.
And how important communication is, because just a different approach to a conversation, you can learn a lot about
where people's minds were at, and they're just afraid.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm glad you fought through your little spell and stayed with us, because we loved having you here. It was amazing. For me, I would just say, remind yourself to, you know, go with your gut, find your people that oh, hello. Bill mentioned, you know, making your own table to have a seat at. And sometimes that is really the best way to go about it, because though for me, like, the table that I've made with my friends is like the one that I'm most excited for, even when I am collaborating with people that I look up to. It's amazing. But when I have my homies, my people that I would, you know, we just all get it. We're on the same page, and we, you know, came up together. Those relationships are like just irreplaceable, like Beyonce said, you know. So I would just say, yeah, follow your gut, you know, stay true to yourself. And don't also be nice, but like, don't take no shit, you know, all that.
Love it. Yes.
I definitely have a couple. There's a few. Never hope more than you work. That's one of the things I always tell my clients. It's great. We all want the Grammy. We all want the awards. We all want the followers. But you got to work for it. Please don't just hope for it, work for it. So that's first thing. As many of us have said here, know whose shoulders you're standing on. I always think it's really important. I can never say that enough. A lot of people have fought for all of us to be able to sit here and have this conversation freely and not be edited or monitored, speak our truths. That what hasn't always been the case for our community. A lot of people lost their lives in order for us to be able to do that. So that's always very important. Music business or outside of music business. Don't ask, don't get. As we've all also spoken about, like, don't assume that they're going to call you. Don't assume that they're going to lift you up just because you're good. Particularly if you are a woman, if you're an LGBTQI member, or if you're a person of color. It's just a fact. So stop pretending that is not a fact. It's a fact. So I always say, don't ask, don't get. Don't be afraid to ask for what you deserve. Don't be afraid to ask for if you think you deserve that same fee or deserve a fee. And actually, it doesn't have to be the same fee. Maybe it's above that fee because that's what you've earned. That's the thing. It's like we've been so conditioned to kind of like, well, I don't want to ask for more than what he gets. I'm like, no, actually, I'm going to ask for more than what he gets because I earned it.
Right. Closed mouths don't get fed.
great. That's been a long lesson that has taken me to really learn, like, oh, I've earned this. I've earned the right to ask for X, Y, and Z. So I definitely put that out there. Lastly, I actually wrote this down because I just saw it today and I knew we were speaking, and I was like, oh, this is really good. It's like, never water a garden that doesn't want to see you bloom. So I'm going to leave that with you.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And of course, last but not least, Bianco, anything for our audiences?
I would say that if people are looking to discover their voice and like just tipping their toes in and getting into it, I would encourage them to explore all scenes of music, meaning that maybe they don't realize that they have thought things are not for them because they have not been for them. And they might find that their voice or their talents like are naturally God-given and like rock and roll, but they've just never thought of themselves as a rock and roll front man, but because they didn't think it was for them, right? So like I think like that people giving time and like energy, spending some time in different like with different genres of music and like thinking about like playing them, learning them, like even just like a little bit of effort while they're trying to find their voice, because I found that a lot of things I just didn't really see a lot of the genre I make now, like people that were doing that, and I had to go looking for it and then realize that I was like, that's where I want it to exist, you know? And I would have saved some time had I like spent time with that up front and thought like, maybe I'm not choosing, like, maybe I'm just doing what I've been exposed to versus like what I'm actually the most gifted at. And then also, yeah, I would say like, build your own table. And there's a lot, and just connect with people, because there's so many people that like are doing the same thing that have to build their own table, and we just are all going to make it easier for each other as we connect with each other and really lift each other up that way.
Yeah, I mean, this is awesome because now I'm gonna like check everybody out.
Yes. Well, yeah, thank you guys all so much for sharing. And Bianca, that is such a great note to end on. I think that, you know, we all have our own experiences and our own journeys. So, you know, why not take that and use it to not only get seats at tables, but build our own tables as well. With that, that's really all the time we have today. I want to thank each of you for joining us on our UnMute LGBTQIA in Music episode. And yeah, thank you guys so much. Have a good rest of y'all's day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Y'all are amazing.